for kids.
Yes, I do, yes. Um, so we're here to talk about books as always. And this time, this is part two in a returning series of books written by guys called Kenneth. We will, of course, also be talking the collected works of Kenneth Dodd pretty soon as well.
The Diaries of Kenneth Tynan.
Yep. The vast library that is the writings of Kenneth Everett.
And of course, Kenny Everett.
Him too, yes.
Yeah.
So
actually, I wonder if there's a Kenny Everett memoir. That might actually be rather interesting. Because the one thing about Kenny Everett I never considered when I was a child was he was a little bit of a Liberace hiding in plain sight kind of figure, wasn't he?
Yes.
Which I don't think I ever picked up on as a child.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, he did tons of drag and tons of outrageous. He kind of had, yeah. I mean, he was about as well hidden as the lead singer Judas Priest, right?
Right. Or Kenneth Williams himself, actually.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So yes, we are talking this time about Kenneth Flexner Fearing, who is an author I did not know existed at all.
Okay.
I was reading a kind of a recommend list of lesser known, I guess, people who worked in the noir side of fiction. And this book that we read, The Big Clock, showed up. That's Clock, Clock.
Yes, yeah, I was alarmed as well as when Nick suddenly started boasting about the size of his huge clock.
Yes,
with me, and I thought, whoa, tone it down there, Nick. But it turns out it was a timepiece.
Yes, it was. So this is a book that I never heard of before, but it was recommended in this kind of list of as I said, okay. So who wrote the Sailor and Lula books? Keith Gifford, right?
Not Keith, no. It's Barry.
Barry Gifford. Who's Keith Gifford?
He wrote a lot of science fiction. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So no, we're talking about Barry. So
right.
Barry Gifford, who wrote the Sailor and Lula books, the ones that were turned into the Nicolas Cage movie. Which is the Nicolas Cage movie again?
Well, if you'll notice as well, my bookmark, I've actually read pretty much all of them as well now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I'm just doing that.
I should go back and do that too then.
Yeah, I mean, update. I mean, I think they work actually they kind of work as a collection because each one's only like an hour long or something to read. So
right.
I mean, really perfect bathing reading. I do like a novel each bath, an entire novella each bath, and they get you get a sense. Yeah, the more you read them and the more you get to know Sailor and Lula as they age, then you kind of get slightly more in on the joke in a way.
Okay.
I would recommend soldiering on through that collection.
Okay, I will definitely go back to it. Yeah, so Wild at Heart and then Perdita Durango, two of those novels that were turned into films. But anyway, so Barry, did you know that he founded Vintage?
No, that I did not know actually. No.
Sorry, not Vintage. Black Lizard, which was then bought by Vintage.
Oh, is that right? Oh, okay. That makes. I no idea.
He put all of those Jim Thompsons. He put all of those some of the Willifords, all of those. Apparently that was very much. He was the big push behind a lot of that stuff being back in print in nice quality, easy to find editions.
Oh, cheers, Barry. Baza. It's actually I've become more interested as well since reading some more of the stories after we did Perdita Durango. So I'm quite keen to see. There's that documentary kind of based on his growing up in Chicago as well, right? Because I think if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't when isn't his father somehow involved in the world of organized crime or
Oh,
something?
yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so,
So was the
Kenneth,
list you read, was it compiled by, I'm trying to see what the
I
Basil
don't think
connection.
so. No, no. I think it was just that, like, basically, there's a series of authors who are now fairly well known within aficionados of that kind of scene, right? But weren't for so I can say like, oh well, everyone knows Jim Thompson, and everyone knows
Right.
Charles Willeford, and and maybe fewer people know about Kenneth Fearing, but the only reason that we know about them is because of basically it's not that long ago that they had their resurgence. That like
Right. Right.
the 90s basically was when a lot of those. But I think Kenneth Fearing seems to have been one of those people who's maybe was missed a little bit in that first.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's funny. I was guessing that you might have been looking around at such a thing because you also have on the docket coming up a David Goodis novel, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I was thinking, I see what young Nick's been up to here. Because I, I think they're slightly similar in so much as even though David Goodis, who I'm not actually that familiar with either, so I'm very much looking forward to reading that book you selected as well. They seem to, even though he wrote a lot more crime and stuff, and Kenneth Fearing didn't, because he was more known as being a poet, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But I sense they're both on that kind of slightly separate list of what more snobby readers, I suppose, would consider like you hear this phrase nowadays, which drives me nuts. I hate it. Elevated horror, right? About
Yes.
like the films of A24 and stuff like that. And I think
Hmm.
I get the feeling that yeah, people like um Jim Thompson and Willeford and stuff, they were considered a bit more kind of hacky, I
Right.
suppose. Whereas I think David Goodis and Kenneth Fearing always had a slightly, they were considered a little bit more literary, maybe even literary as heck, you never know.
Yes.
Kind of closer to Hammett and Chandler rather than people like Thompson and Willeford and Day Keane and do you know what I mean? Like
Yes. Yeah.
not jobbing, churning out kind of
Although
writers.
I wish I could find it now because I today as I was reading a bit more about it, I was hopped about a few websites and I was specifically looking for whether there was anybody who'd mentioned or talked about the fact that there's a structural element to this book, and apparently it's consistent in a lot of his books, where he has multiple first-person narrators, and it's kind of that Rashomon effect
Yeah.
of like putting it together. Um,
It's a bit
and
George B. Higgins.
yeah, but I wondered if because it's something that later on Jim Thompson uses
Right.
quite a bit, right? And also the kind of the untrustworthy narrator, or the narrator who's like in the situation up to his eyeballs or is dead or dying, right? All of these kind of things are things apparently that Fearing did, not necessarily in this book, but in his books, in his run of kind of crimey adjacent books, right? And so I was just looking, had anyone written much about like whether or not his work was an influence on, because they're not quite contemporaries. He's a slightly older generation in that I think Thompson was like a teenager during the Depression, whereas I think Fearing was like already like working as a writer and a poet and
Right. But do you see what I mean as well about I feel as if maybe their audiences, even though they overlap,
Mhm.
they're a different they're a different breed in a way, the Goodness and the Fearings. I think
Yeah,
there are people who will have read them who wouldn't have gone near his
yeah, the killer
books.
inside me.
Yeah.
Right. Um, but apparently, so this is what I was trying to find. But he was very much a jobby. He was writing softcore pornography at the same time
Oh,
under another name, which was given in one of these articles, and it was a great name. And I'm trying to
well,
find
that
it now.
was the big cock, that one.
Yes, that was yes, exactly. Um, but anyway, if it turns up while we're talking in my brain, I'll let you know.
These huge, long existential passages of the big cock is always there. The big cock is
Exactly.
always there.
Um, so so yeah. Anyway, so this book and this author were new to me. Apparently, it seems as like if you read a bit of his biography, it seems as though actually our kind of our main character of the story, right? A guy, George Stroud, who works for a magazine combine almost, right? This building that's got all these multiple
like Time Life, isn't it? I think.
Yes, it
Who
seems
he
like it's
did work for, right? So apparently this was a thinly veiled attack against
right.
his employer. And I was reading as well that another couple of influences. There were some then well-known but now totally forgotten New York City brewery heiress murder case
Okay.
was one thing. And then the other one, apparently, and again, this is one we've been meaning to read, but I think it was out of print and expensive, so we didn't get it. Sam Fuller's My Dark Page,
Okay. Yes.
which was turned into, I've never read that because it's, yeah, like I said, it's a bit pricey, but it was turned into the film Scandal Sheet,
Okay.
1952 with Broderick Crawford. And yeah, I mean the film's kind of okay or whatever, but Sam Fuller has nothing to do with the film. He didn't write the screenplay or he didn't direct it or anything like that. But yeah, thinking about it, Scandal Sheet, the plot of that one as well. Yes, I can see where Kenneth Fearing might have borrowed a little bit from Sam Fuller for, which is kind of interesting because we forget, you know, because Sam Fuller is just such a legend, kind of independent filmmaker. We tend to forget of the writer reporter part of him,
Right.
even though he had that persona, that cigar chomping for the rest of his life, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this, I don't know where I was going with that. I guess I was starting to talk about the plot, maybe. I'm trying to think now.
Not in your head.
This is a problem, Clive. You need to get in there and marshal my thoughts for me. Yeah, so basically, I mean, whatever I was going to say, we won't worry about that, and we'll get down to brass tacks and quickly outline the plot here, because I do think the central like conceit of this book is awesome. And it may be lifted from somewhere else. I don't know. There may be an older literary, example of whatever this genre is, of the person who's hired to investigate a crime where all evidence points towards themselves as the culprit, and they know this, and they're hired to figure out, to solve the crime by the person who actually committed the crime.
Yes, and it'll be interesting as well. We've got a few different film adaptations to discuss, and it's interesting how they all slightly change the emphasis. Because if I'm correct in the book, he's totally aware of who the actual murderer is from the beginning. Right?
Oh yes,
which is something that oddly enough isn't present in any of the film versions.
Yeah, the adaptations. Yeah. No, he knows almost. Yeah, you're right. He knows almost immediately that it's his boss again, the boss, Earl Janeth, who owns this massive publishing empire, right?
We don't even have to give spoiler alerts because that is the beginning of the book pretty much.
I mean, maybe we may want to stay away from spoilers to some degree about the ending, and they're all kind of different, like all the adaptations I think do slightly things with the ending.
Forewarned, just in case we don't. Spoiler alert.
Yes, spoiler alert. Yeah. In fact, I mean,
watch all the films, read every book.
Would you be comfortable telling people, Clive, to just go read? Because I'm comfortable telling people to go read.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for that matter, I'm going to tell you, you could certainly watch the 1940 whatever film adaptation. It's not bad at all. But what you do need to do is see Police Python 357, which I had not seen before. I liked a fuck ton, and we'll talk about that when we get to it.
Yes. I agreed. Although worth mentioning again that's, I mean, if I hadn't have known that was an adaptation of the big plot, I don't think I would have put two and two together, even after reading the book. Like the links between that film and the book are fairly tenuous, I would say.
Yes, but at the same point, I mean, but the central conceit is there, right?
Yeah, and it is the best film, but it's not necessarily the most representative of the
novel. No. But anyway, so yeah.
Well, hang on, before you get into the plot, because we're
Yes.
about to get kicked off, so there's a perfect little wedge of time just to mention that this was, of course, first serialized, right, in the American magazine in 1946 under the title The Judas Picture.
Ah, okay.
So it is AKA The Judas Picture, which is something that passed me by at first, and then I noticed. So, plot then.
So yeah, basically we our main character is George Stroud, who works for this big combine. He runs what is it, Crime Ways magazine that he's
Crime
the
Waves.
Crime Ways, yeah. And there's a bunch of other Future Ways and whatever else, Home Ways and all this, these various other special interest kind of magazines. We kind of get the impression that the company may be kind of falling on hard times, magazine circulation maybe not all that it was.
Yeah, I don't know what the stats are, but it's probably one of those things that are kind of laughable nowadays, right? Like it's something like our circulation is only 5 billion people
exactly.
or something.
Yes. Um, so yeah, and he's kind of this like glib, kind of sort of flippant guy, has a wife and child, both also called George, which is an interesting feature of the book. In that way, it does remind me of some of the weirder Williford stuff. Like Williford was the kind of would who play with stuff like that. You'd be like, what? Like just
Yeah,
slightly
yeah.
outside of being ridiculous, but somehow you go along with it.
Actually, the way this read, I don't think I've ever read anything quite like it. Falls into for me, I was thinking it's kind of this weird space, which is somewhere between like Williford, but also there's like an F. Scott Fitzgerald thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very peculiar little spot. I'm keen to read. I don't know if any of other Kenneth Fearing's books are like this, but because he is quite the poet as well, right? Like
yes.
you can
So,
tell there's lots of turns of phrase which are beautiful.
and I'm kind of interested to maybe see some of his poetry too, just because it's apparently very acerbic and very kind of critical of the media. I mean, we see this in this
Yeah,
novel as well, right? It's an extension of his criticism of
yeah,
the American mass media, right? But at
yes.
the time, it seems so weird now, given that it's so much worse in every possible way now. But yet some of those things were baked into the pie from the beginning, right?
Right.
Um,
And now as well, I think, like you said, we just think of him as that bloke who wrote the big clock. Whereas, I feel as if he was at the time, yeah, considered almost like an establishment critic or something, which is something slightly lost to the sands of time, right? Unless you're a Kenneth Fearing scholar.
yes, yeah, but yeah, he was investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee and all of that. I mean, he definitely, although he never specifically joined the Communist Party or whatever, but he seems to have
Right.
been kind of
Always
on
a, always a sign that someone's doing some good if the House of Un-American.
yeah, is interested.
I was led astray by the treachery of others, sir.
He was a heavy drinker, which is something that comes through, I think, in this character, right? And it does seem as though his drinking kind of is why Kenneth died quite young. It seems like he kind of really fell to pieces later in life, and also was difficulty keeping marriages and relationships together as well, and definitely was a cheater. Which is so it's interesting that in some ways there is an element of sort of autobiography about this, like George Stroud, right? Because
Yeah.
in the book, and this is interesting, that's something that like none of the versions that I've seen, I haven't watched the Kevin Costner whatever it was, late
No
80s,
Way
early
Out.
90s, No Way Out. But none of the films make him kind of the asshole he really is in the book.
Yeah,
I think.
I suppose so, yes.
I mean, Eve Montana's a different kind of asshole, but not this kind of asshole, not the
Right.
glib guy who's has had multiple affairs, drinks too much, and is just kind of a bit of a dick in some ways.
But even in the book, I mean, it's quite clever. I quite like the way that in a way you could argue that he's what they call an unreliable narrator, right? But it's very subtle.
Yes.
It's very subtle. because he does, yeah, it is your protagonist who leads you through the story, and yeah, compared to other people, he's not as bad, but yeah, it's subtly seeded that he might be a bit crap at home, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, I mean, we do get one little chapter from the point of view of his wife when it comes out that basically she's quite brittle, and it's because he has had multiple affairs before that she's known about them all, and that this is kind of, you know.
Well, there's the whole thing as well, like where it seems like it's a huge burden to him, just to have a kind of conversation with his daughter at the breakfast table. I mean, it's kind of it's quite cute as well, and but it's kind of like, on the one hand, yes, that's a kind of good running gag that you have with your daughter, but on the other hand, it really seems like it's pulling teeth to get it out of him as well, right? Like,
Right.
the one little bit of daddy that she has to kind of, you know, glom to, right? When he's off drinking and fucking other women or something.
Right.
Which reads very realistically to me as well. I mean, you know, number of, you know, people who have that kind of golden memory of a shit parent, because why would you remember the other stuff?
The
right?
other stuff. Yes, yeah. So basically he ends up having a very brief fling with the girlfriend of his boss. I don't think he knows. Does he know this? I can't remember now in the book if he does actually even know that she is.
I think he does know. I think
he does. I think he does. Yeah. So she is. Yeah, she's the girlfriend of Janoth, this magnate of the publishing world, and so basically he goes out with her all over the place and leaves a bunch of kind of clues to himself, inadvertently, not knowing that she's going to get murdered the same night he takes her out by by his boss, right? By her kind of she's sort of a kept woman, right? It's hard to know at which point I'm like which parts of the book, which parts of the various film adaptations, but I'm pretty sure that's how it goes.
Yeah, it's almost like he's resigned to having a fling, like it's the weather or something, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
like, I possibly can't do anything about it. This is just the way things are going, you know.
Yeah. So anyway, so she gets bludgeoned to death in an angry outburst by her, whatever he is, lover, or um I'm looking for a word like sugar daddy.
Mistress, I guess, isn't she?
Yeah, she's the mistress, and he's kind of maybe some sort of sugar daddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there's this whole thing where in this version she's sort of coded, or we're directly told that she's bisexual as well, and that she's had a series of relationships with women, because this seems to be the part of the explosive argument that causes him to kill her, right?
Right.
So anyway, he goes off, and there's a kind of a fixer who is kind of a partner with Janoth in the publishing, and he basically tells him, no, you're not going to go and turn yourself into the police or anything like that, because he does seem to be shaken up. In this version, more in the book almost than in any of the other. I guess in the French film he's also he's a bit fucked up, but in the 1940s film adaptation he's just a heel, the boss, played by Charles Lawton, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, he ends up being given the job of investigating, because the boss is trying to pin it on somebody, and they kind of, how does he figure? I don't remember how they figure out.
So basically, just our main character drops her off at his place just before the murder occurs, and the boss is aware that there was someone there, but he doesn't know who. And then later, when the body is discovered, our main character immediately puts two and two together and realizes, oh shit. And exactly as to why he doesn't kind of just go to the police is,
well, this is because of the effect.
Yeah,
because so in this version, because this is different in the films basically, but in this version, because he has had an affair, he doesn't want to blow up his life. Basically, he thinks his wife is going to leave him at this point and take the kid. Well, he's not ready. He seems like he's not ready for that level of like.
Well,
you
more
know.
than that, I got the feeling as well that there's a certain amount of not corporate allegiance exactly, but there's like it's like, oh fuck, I can't, because if I sink the company
Yeah,
now, we all go down with the ship kind of thing.
yeah.
And there's a kind of neat at the end the way it plays out. It's like
Mhm.
everyone's just dodged a bullet, and actually, in a way, the all the despicable people right at the very end kind of do the right thing,
Yes, yes.
which is also kind of interesting. And it doesn't feel shoehorned in, or it doesn't feel out of left field. Like it actually kind of, it all makes sense to me.
Hmm.
So it ends on this kind of note of, yeah, it's I suppose bittersweet, I suppose would be the
Hmm.
correct phrase, right? Because nothing's really, I mean, certain people have, yeah, I don't know. It's a very
Yeah.
murky kind of gray
Hmm.
world of morals we're in here, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, but I think that, so the central, as I said, this the central like conceit, I think is brilliant, right? I think this idea that basically you are hired to do this, to run this investigation, where basically at the same time as you're running it, you're also doing everything you possibly can in the process to fuck it up, to stymie it,
Yeah,
to lead it down blind alleys, to not, because you know that although you're innocent, that there's a ton of evidence that connects you with the
yeah.
crime scene.
You would be the prime suspect,
You're
were
the
you?
prime
Yeah,
suspect, right?
were
And
you to be
so
discovered to have been where you were, right?
you have him sandwiched as well between, and this works really well, I think, in the French version, right? He's sandwiched between the people below him who are doing the investigation that are getting suspicious of, like, it feels like the boss is really making sure we don't do certain things, you know, and then the people above him who've demanded, who are, you know, his boss does want him to find himself, you know,
Mm.
because he needs a patsy, he needs somebody. And then there's this other element too where if he finds himself, we basically know that there's not going to be a trial because his boss is going to have him killed, right? That there's a kind of there's a heavy, right, who is gonna, yeah, whack him basically. And so I do think there's a mounting kind of dread that I really like, and I think that
Yes.
the French film really understands.
Well, it's
And
interesting as well,
thank you.
considering the big clock and all. It does remind me of, that phrase, put together like a Swiss watch as well. It's kind of it's really it plays itself out
Yes.
very neatly, and it's quite a pleasure to it's yeah, it's not so much because in the same way as Columbo works in a way, there's no massive reveal, like
No.
because you kind of know what the story is from the beginning, right? It's just kind of how exactly it's going to play itself out. And like we said, Kenneth Fearing writes in this very kind of, it's very it's there's nothing, there's a lot of dialogue, so it moves
Mhm.
really, really quickly. But every now and again, it stops to just give you a nice little jewel of a turn of phrase that makes you stop and think,
Yeah.
oh, that's lovely. That is. I didn't write
Hmm.
any of them down, I have to admit.
No, no,
It
but
was just
yes.
like, and then you carry on, and so it's a very nice. It's a nice balance. It's a fine piece of Pulp Fiction as filtered through the mind of a poet, right?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in reading more. And as I said, to me, there are elements of the kind of the meaner, rougher side of noir in there.
Mm.
But it's balanced. And I think maybe it's just the honesty. There's something really honest about this book, and that's the same thing that attracts me to Williford and to Jim Thompson. A feeling of like these people are willing to think it and then to write it down and
Mm.
then take the next step of publishing it and sharing it with the world, right? And at each point, the average person will be like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not going to follow that line of thought any further." Rather than I'm going to sit down and push this to, yeah,
There's
you
one
know.
section I really, really liked, which is worth highlighting because none of the film versions really get. I think actually only one of them tries to do it, but there's like a one important character is there's this like guy who runs like a
Yep.
kind of bric-a-brac place or something, and his spiel is that basically, I've got everything here. If you ask for something, like he'll have it somewhere, like show me a trumpet, and he'll have like, I don't know, like a little miniature toy trumpet. Show me a horse, and he'll have like almost anything you can think of. Somehow he's got something that's more or less that thing, right?
And a story to go with it as well.
But what I like about that is because that could go a few different ways. That like they could have really romanticized it, and who is this roguish guy? What I like about it, when they talk about him, the main character is just thinking, oh my god, when's this fucking imbecile gonna shut up? Like, I thought that was really good. Like, he had no time for this fucking idiot.
No, that another character I like a lot who shows up and I think is done very well actually in the movie is the artist, right? So like early on, one of the witnesses against our main character is a woman that he gets in an argument with at a secondhand shop where he's trying to buy a painting. Well, she's trying to buy a painting and he basically sweeps it out from under her by offering far more money for it. And as it turns out later in the story, she's the artist, and she's an artist that he is a big fan of and has been collecting her paintings, right?
Right.
Which leads to some great moments again where, like, as they put together, like, that's what I love about this, is the slow creeping sense of dread as they put together this composite picture of him with places and words and dates and interests, and it's him, and he's watching himself be formed out of bric-a-brac, out of like all of your bits of thread and your bits of paper and all that stuff.
It's all just leading to me.
Leading back to you, exactly. Oh, fuck. Yeah, I think that's really cool. But anyways, but she's a really great character. Like, she's a very real, if you've been to art school, she's amazingly real. And the actor who plays her in that 48 film is fucking dead on.
Elsa Lanchester.
Okay.
Of Bride of Frankenstein fame.
Okay.
And of course, Mrs. Charles Lawton, right, in real life.
I did not realize that. Wow.
Yes. And apparently, a slightly, from what I understand, because they had that kind of fascinating dynamic as a couple where, even though I think they seem to have been very much in love and very much like a couple in touch with it, she was basically a high profile beard for a closeted homosexual man,
right?
But apparently that character is slightly close to her. She was highly strung, I think is the phrase. Right. And obviously Charles Lawton as well. I mean, I don't know, a dinner party around at their house could have either been the best dinner party you've ever gone to or a nightmare.
Yes.
Shall we go around the Lawtons tonight? I don't know. That was a proposition that would have, not sure. But so the 1948 version, we should say, is Charles Lawton as the boss.
He's played a bit more one note. I mean, he's really good. His performance is amazing. But in terms of, like, he's just so weirdly, like, disconnected and kind of like, he's an asshole, like, for sure, but a very disconnected asshole. Like, he's above it all.
Right.
So he does do the scene when he's just murdered his mistress. He does that well. He does put across the idea that he's shaken up. He goes to. It's funny, in the film version, it really struck me that his fixer is called Hagen, because I think he is in the book as well. But, like, because Lawton's a big heavy set guy, and then he's got this, like, what's the Italian word for it? The one that consigliere. And he has a consigliere called Hagen, right? Because that is the name of the one in The Godfather, I think.
Oh, is that right? Tom Hagen. Robert Duvall's character, you mean?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's called Tom Hagen.
Yes, you might be right, actually. I wonder if that's no, maybe just coincidence, but but
I mean, Puzo, I mean, I think we're going to talk a bit later on. This film may have embedded itself in the subconscious of many people who watch this and bubbled up in different ways, right, in cinematic history.
The thing that struck me.
The funny thing is, there isn't a big fucking clock in the book at all, right? I'm not wrong. It's entirely a metaphor in the book.
Right. Yeah, there isn't a literal big clock. But the The one thing that struck me, apropos nothing really, but I thought this was one of those what's the it's like a, an epiphany that you can't do anything about, so it's kind of useless. But I was watching this and I was thinking, it's too late to do anything about it now. But basically, if they would have made a biopic in the 1950s or something, Charles Laughton could have played Todd Slaughter, and he would have been brilliant.
Yes.
Something that just struck me. I was like, wow, Charles Laughton could have been in the Todd Slaughter biopic. Although I suppose in the 50s, even Todd Slaughter would have just been in it, right? Because Todd Slaughter was playing like teenage characters into his 60s or something.
Right?
But anyway, just as that. But yeah, and of course, our main
does Ray Milland not look a hell of a lot like Stephen Colbert? At a certain point, it really started to be uncanny to me how much. So yeah, if they ever make a biopic about Ray Milland,
there you are. The
Stephen
Welsh
Colbert
Ray Milland.
Oh, I didn't realize he was Welsh.
Yeah. I think a lot of people didn't, but he was born in Wales.
Wow, he does a great American accent then, because it's flawless, really. I didn't detect anything else going on.
So it's worth mentioning. So the big, I suspect you might have felt the same about the big. I mean, in some ways, it's got that kind of cool, rich detail that old Hollywood films used to have that they don't do anymore, like the whole thing with the elevator girl and the guy trying to chat up, and that stuff's all great, right?
Who was Lois Lane, right?
Yeah. So all that stuff's like stuff you bemoan that they don't do that anymore.
And everyone talking over each other as well. Something like you're like,
so
almost hard to follow in times. Oh fuck, I'm really having to pay attention because
so that stuff's all great. But as I think in terms of like the thriller aspects and stuff like that, I think it's fine, but it doesn't really build up the tension.
No, and it lacks the edge. It lacks the edge of the book, I thought.
Yeah. If anything, I think what The Big Clock, as directed by John Farrow, is just a triumph of production design and camera work and set and stuff like that, and because it looks amazing and flawless, and like you don't notice at first, and then you're like, hang on, all these sweeping camera moves and the sets are incredible, right? Like so I mentioned to you, and I don't think I just made this. I think I have read an interview with the Coen brothers at some point that confirmed this, but this has got to be one of the major templates for the Herzog proxy.
Yes, yeah. I mean, in terms of production design, in terms of the big climactic clock.
Yeah, and a lot of the camera movement and like the spacing and some of the tone of it as well, because it's got that kind of which is because I love that. I think the Herzog proxy is the Coen brothers film that doesn't get quite enough love.
The love it deserves, yes.
Yeah, I think that's a absolutely great film. And so you got four.
And you could see if Steve Buscemi had existed then, that he probably would have been in The Big Clock.
Yes. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention about. You got Maureen O'Sullivan in it as well, of course.
Yes.
And I mean like I said, it's definitely worth watching, and it looks fantastic, but it's not quite a crime classic, is it? It's a bit. I don't know.
As I said, they bowdlerized. Is that the term? Like just a little bit. Like they've softened the edges. George is not having an affair. It's all kind of all mistaken, and he really is a good family man and wants to take his wife on a long delayed honeymoon. And
well, no wonder she's Jane from Tarzan. So who doesn't get her back?
I mean, to have Lois Lane and Jane from Tarzan in the same film is quite a casting coup, I think. And then it's all a bit nice, and then Tom Broughton is a bit one note compared to the character. The character is much more multi-layered in the book of Janice.
Why? Because he's playing the Todd Slaughter version of.
Exactly.
But yeah, no. So yeah, so it's a bit of a yeah, because I'd seen it before, and yeah, like I said, it's the look of the film and everything is a pure, where
Yeah.
the just the kind of way it plays out with thrills and stuff is, yeah, it's not quite. It's a bit of a shame, really,
It's
because it
too
could
bad.
have been.
There's lots, yeah, there's lots to work with in the book that they
Yeah. Well, I don't think he's even aware that Charles Lawton is the murderer, really, is
oh,
he? So
not till the very end, basically. And it kind of surprised me that there was a thing that did never really pay off because he has this way of like listening in to his employees speaking. And I always assumed that at some point that would like backfire on him somehow, but it
right,
never
right.
they never really do
Nixon
anything with it.
style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. But however, so a few years later, 1976, Alain Corneau,
Mm.
French director, whose only other film I think I've seen is his adaptation
Jim
uh,
Thompson.
of Hello
Hello,
Woman.
Woman.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Série
Série
Noire,
Noire.
which is
Yeah,
great.
it's an amazing film. Yeah, so after watching this, I'm like, oh, okay, clearly I need to
Yeah,
set aside
agreed.
a few weeks in the summer and just go through the rest of his because it's not a very long filmography. Actually, he
No,
didn't do
me too.
anything.
I really sat up and paid as because I liked this, as we'll get to, and also I was like, oh fuck, he's Série Noire as well. And then yeah, so this was his second film. He made another film called France Incorporated, his debut feature. After working, he was an AD for Costa Gravas.
Yes, yes, which makes sense because Yves Montand, I guess, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
he's or
He
Z or Z.
he worked on his version of Art of London's The Confession, which is something we might or might not be. I forgot to ask you about that. I'll do it off.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, offline, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, and then he did something after this, Le Menace, and then Série Noire, and then yeah. So I agree with you. I'm on board the Alain Corneau train
Mhm.
as well.
One of them's I think made in Canada too, which immediately like it's made in Canada, but like I guess in French Canada. So
Right,
that
right.
you know. Um so yeah, so this is interesting because in a way this is perfect for me. Like this overlaps three things because I think this is Kenneth Fearing's book, but really leaning into the Série Noir, Jim Thompson-y aspects of it with a healthy dollop of like 1970s Eurocrime slapped in there as well. Which basically for me, and it's a slow burn, so it wasn't right away. I was enjoying it fine, but at a certain point, like about an hour in, I was like, oh fuck, this is really good.
Yeah, it's
And
definitely
the
cumulative.
second
Yeah,
hour was just increasing. You're like, oh my fucking god,
yeah,
this is way better than I had any right to expect it to be.
yeah.
And
No,
by the time I
agreed.
finished, I was on a high. I was
Yeah,
properly,
yeah.
uh,
It's
yeah,
a real cumulative watch, and also some of the way it plays out some of his. I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to mention the plot. Actually, I think we can almost totally avoid it.
maybe the only other thing that is worth mentioning is that it's relocated, and in a way that makes perfect sense. That now it's a police officer,
Yes.
right, who is implicated in this murder that's been done by his
Well,
police
hang
captain
on.
boss.
That's the thing. That's actually a surprise reveal, which you have just spoiled. We don't know that from the beginning. When we actually find out Francois Perrier's who he is,
Right,
it's very quietly delivered,
that's
but it
right.
is a big surprise because it's quite a way into the film because you're aware of Yves Montand's character who's having an affair with this girl, um, Stephanie Sandrelli, right, from The Conformist. And
Yes, yeah,
interesting, she's in The Conformist. She's in Bertolucci's 1900, the same years as 76. And then later on, she's in Tinto Brass's version of Junichiro Tanizaki's The Key.
okay.
So she's in some pretty interesting
Mm.
things. But yeah, and we know she's having an affair with Francois Perrier, and we also know that Francois Perrier is married to Simone Signoret, right? Who's like bedridden.
Yeah,
Uh,
she's brilliant, I have
yeah,
to say.
yeah, yeah.
She's
She's
really
always good.
good.
Um, of course, people know her from when she was younger in The Cat People, right? But she went on to a really, and she's also really good in Jean-Pierre Melville's Army of Shadows as well. She's really good in that.
Seen that, but
She always
okay.
reminds me a little bit of like she's like a French Shelley Winters or something like that.
Yes, yes.
But a bit more toned down, right?
Yes.
Shelley Winters could be. Oh,
Yeah, come
God,
on.
Shelley. Yeah, I love Shelley Winters as well. But and she knows that he's having an affair with a younger girl. And
Well, they're French, so obviously it's like I love that complete like whatever.
yeah,
You know, oh, she's a sweet girl. You know,
yeah.
like.
But we don't know.
Okay, you made your right guess. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff like that that plays out very quietly, right? The other thing I noticed that was quite interesting. So it was this guy, the producer, Bino de Borovray, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the guy who produced this and Série Noire, and then in between, he produced that Zworsky film, The Most Important Thing, Love. So he's got some interesting credits as well.
Totally. Fuck.
Yeah.
And
but,
you know, it's I always forget that the one who plays the teenage girl in Série Noire is Jean-Louis Trintignant's daughter, who was later murdered by some French rock star dickhead.
Yeah.
Who got away with it, basically. Did a couple of years in jail and then got out and now practiced playing on stage again.
Well, the interesting thing with that Série Noire film as well, if I remember correctly, isn't like everyone in it now dead. Like, there's no one alive who was in that film. They all died.
First of Jim Thompson.
Yeah.
Well, think about what's his name. Baldwin ended up killing somebody, right? Accidentally.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Well, he was in The Getaway. I'm thinking. I'm trying to make connections now.
I see.
Possible curse of Jim Thompson.
But we should mention, yeah. So that the kind of great ending as well is
so good.
Yeah, but it's
multi-layered. It's multi-tiered because I honestly and I'd read the book and obviously they were making adjustments and changes. But as I watched the movie, I really had no idea how they were going to end it.
But no, what I mean is the ending is like one of those endings that could so easily not be earned. Because it's so out of left field in a way which is either lazy if it wasn't done, like it's a very convenient way to wrap up the story, or kind of genius. And I lean towards the latter. Yeah. Plus, it's fucking exciting. It's like something from Magnum Force or something, right?
It's great.
Yeah.
It's fucking amazing.
And it turns into a Maurizio Merli film or something.
Yeah, totally. But they've established at the beginning that he is a crack shot, an expert kind of marksman. And the other thing that I like about him too, he's not as a main character, he's not the glib, chatty kind of, you know, character that George is in the novel at all, right? He's
right.
If any, and they kind of established that he's come really hard scrabble, basically from an orphanage. So it makes sense that he's hanging on to his own life with like both hands.
Yeah.
So tightly, like, fuck you, I will not go down. I will not go gently.
To the point of throwing acid in his own face.
I mean, that scene is amazing. Or the scene where he just shreds her entire apartment. Like,
yeah. It reminded me of The Conversation a little bit. Though.
Yes. Yeah.
No, it is a great film.
Creeping paranoia. There's that great moment where they finally do the identikit drawing and it's on the wall and he's got all the bandages, his fucking Joe Shapiro bandages on, and the guy just looks up and it's obviously just him.
Matthew Carriere, right, as his partner who's like frustrated.
He's great too, actually. And
whereas I agree with it. It's one of those times I think it's worth putting out there, it's worth saying like stick with it. And pay attention, because you might at first, like you said, find yourself slightly attention drifting, not because it isn't good, but it's not a film that commands your attention. It's deliberately kind of quiet, and loose, and you're not quite sure, and then it slowly tightens, right? And then by the time you get, like I said, it's very cumulative. By the time you get to the end, you're like, yeah, fuck, what a great film that was. And certainly the best of the three adaptations, even though not representative of the book. I mean, there's like central conceit, but like I said,
there's a few little details, but you're right.
But I really don't think even if I'd read the book and I watched, if I didn't know it was an adaptation, I don't think I would have put two and two together.
Right.
So I know, Nick, calm down. I know you're like, oh, I want to talk Kevin Costner as always.
I would love to. I would love to.
So I did. I took one for the team.
Wow.
Yes, I did watch No Way Out from 1997, which I'd assumed I'd seen before, actually, but I don't think I had. I think I'm mixing it up with another similar Kevin Costner on the run film. So in this version, Kevin Costner he's a Navy commander.
Okay.
And he has an affair with Sean Young, who turns out to be a mistress of the Secretary of Defense, as played by none other than Gene Hackman. So, So this is basically, it's been transposed to Washington, the world of Washington bureaucracy in this case.
Right.
And it does actually play quite close to the book. The only thing so I watched it, and it's okay, but it's very much the film you think it is. 1987, directed by, kind of competent hack Roger Donaldson. He's done like Cocktail and Species and
Jesus, wet. That's a shit sandwich right there, Clive.
And like you quite like the Jason Statham film, The Bank Job. Like, he's all over the map.
Okay.
Like,
all right.
But he knows how to put the film together. But he's it's
inspired.
Yeah,
workman-like.
Exactly. So it's exactly that film you expect. There's no surprises. It's not terrible. Of course, it's slick. It's Hollywood, but it's it's not. But the one thing they added, which I didn't see coming and made me laugh, even though I don't think it's supposed to make you laugh, and it's very much of its era. So it's 87. So we're still kind of in the Cold War, right? It's tapering out. And this is a major spoiler, I suppose, even though it's just very, very, very end. And it's actually totally arbitrary, because it doesn't make the conspiracy. There's no reason for this to. But it turns out at the very, 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 very end, after all this is played out as you expect, Kevin Costner was a Russian spy the whole time. It's just like a did quarter, bang, right at the very end. And it made me laugh out loud, because it's like, there's no need for that to be there at all. That's just gratuitously end of Cold War era, just an extra little throw that into the end. Yeah. So that made me laugh. Otherwise, not notable in any way, shape, or form. So there we go. Read The Big Clock.
Yes.
Watch Police. Yes. Because I was worried, 1 minute Nick's on a guy showing off about his big clock, and then when he shuts up about that, he whips out his Python. But it all turned out well in the end, and I could sit down after a couple of days, so it was all right.
Yes. Yeah. So thanks, Kenneth.
Yes.
Thanks for
and Alan.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, all this was new to me this time, and I'm always excited to find an author who I might want to read the rest of. So
yeah, absolutely. Right. So until next time then.